recording.
Oh, yeah, the last part was, Saul seemed not to recognize David, even though he should have known it.
Yeah, it was, David had been with him at least for a little while, providing
Entertainment.
music comfort for him, music therapy, and became his armor bearer now. And so, David's gotten around in a fairly short amount of time. So,
By the way, how many people knew that Saul had marked, that Samuel had marked David?
Jesse's family and Samuel and David.
Okay.
By this point.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, by this point. Okay, so we are in. Yeah, I'm trying to get there. I think it's 18.
It is 18.
Okay, yeah, we're in 1 Samuel 18. Get that out of the way there. So when David finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David. Ooh. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Man, don't you like friends like that? Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. So, that keeper that keeper that David left with the sheep is probably out there in the field wondering, what the heck?
Where'd everybody go?
He's out there for months. Is he coming back? Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing. Now remember, Jonathan is the son of Saul, so he's the heir apparent. And gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. So David, in just a short amount of time, becomes the general of the army. And he's just a young shepherd boy. So, so Jonathan, just my notes there. Jonathan is we've got to remember, he's the crown prince here. And the connection between the two is you've got the crown prince, best friends, brothers in a way, with a lowly shepherd boy. So, and at this point, David is becoming more popular than Saul. Now, we all know Saul's character. Nothing good can come from this whenever somebody shows up Saul. So, on to verse 6. As they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. And this is the song they sang. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. Now, how would you like for a bunch of attractive young people come out singing, and they're singing about somebody else? Saul was very angry, for this saying displeased him, I bet. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? Oh, little does Saul know. What a statement. So Saul eyed David from that day on. What more indeed? The next day, an evil spirit from God was set upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day.
An evil spirit from God?
These are some of those statements that we have trouble defending. This is where these questions of, is the God of the Old Testament the same as the God of the New Testament? It's things like this. What I will say is the writer is trying to make it known that God has removed the Holy Spirit from Saul's life. Therefore, it's opened Saul up to all kinds of other things.
Okay.
So, and so David's the general of the armies, and here he is. He's still playing the lyre for Saul. I mean, what a job! Golly, so many hats. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. That's not through his clothing, that is through his body. but David eluded him twice. So this is kind of a foreshadowing because Saul only threw a spear one time. I mean, David wouldn't have hung around to let him throw a second time. Okay. This is alluding to a second thing that we'll actually read today too, where he tries it again. Saul tries to do it again later on. So David eluded him twice. This is the first time. We'll hear about it a second time. So Saul is so affected. Now, Saul, remember, is a man of war. You would think that he could throw a spear pretty straight, but I joke and say that he's so affected, he's so mad that he can't see straight. So,
Maybe David's good at dodging.
maybe David's good at dodging. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in leading the army. So David is, we find out that David kind of gets demoted. He's still a commander, but he's not general of the army. He's, Saul makes him less. This is the one thing Saul does have control over is who David commands. So
He is still the king.
yes, David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw, boy, that's an alliteration. When Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in leading them.
You wonder if Saul was sending him out thinking he'd get killed if he.
Aha! And we know where that story leads.
Yeah.
We get a
David
very
does the
similar
same thing.
story.
Yeah. Right.
Then Saul said to David, here is my oldest daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him. There's your answer, Anita. So remember when all the soldiers were talking about, whoever kills this giant is, going to become the son-in-law of the king because he's going to give him a daughter. Well, it's finally coming to pass here. He said, Saul has offered his eldest daughter, Merab. David said to Saul, who am I and who are my kinsfolk, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? So David is being very modest. But at the time when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Meholathite, as a wife. So Saul withdraws the offer. Merab, by the way, means God will increase. David, we believe, couldn't afford the dowry that was required. And so Saul would probably ask for him to battle 100 Philistines. We'll see that that's exactly what happened. Adriel means belonging to God. And it's believed that it's an attempt here to make David a little jealous. So Saul had got some ulterior motives for doing what he did. Mahalath, we hear about the Maholathites. Mahalath means weak, descended from Ishmael and Esau through marriage. So, on to 20. Now, Saul's daughter, Michal, what a great name, loved David. God was told, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private and say, see, the king is delighted with you and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private. And David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute? The servants of Saul told him, this is what David said. Or the servants of Saul told him, that means Saul. This is what David said. Now Saul is doing a second, this is a trap. Anita, you were right on. He's trying to find a way to have more control over David. And by doing that, he could do that by making him a member of his own family. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. The things you find in the Bible. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. There's our answer. When his servants told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David rose and went along with his men and killed 100 of the Philistines, and David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. That means that he counted them out as he presented them. Okay,
Yeah.
1, 2. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. So David has outwitted Saul here, because when they made this agreement that instead of a dowry, David would provide 100 foreskins and Philistines as the dowry. Saul was thinking, you know what? David's got to do this. David outwitted him by using his own troops to do it too. So he had a greater force when he went out, and it was very easy because Saul hadn't put it in writing per se, that only David could do it. David outwitted him using some other help. So yeah, enemy here is a very strong word. Whenever we hear the word enemy from this point out, that's not only foe, not only someone coming against you, but someone who you cannot abide with, you can't live with, you can't be near, you can't, just nothing.
That you hate.
Hate, yeah. On to 30. The commanders of the Philistines
Came out to
came out to battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul. That is his fame, so that his fame became very great. So David is commander over 1,000 troops. There's other commanders too that are going out, but David had more success than all of them. So, now it says the commanders of the Philistines. David is having so much success that the Philistines are running out of conscripted soldiers, and so not only are so they're running out of men, and so the commanders, the ones leading the troops, are having to come out and actually do the fighting as a troop themselves, is what this is meaning. So
It's
there's
not a one-on-one combat.
oh no, this is group and right. So anyway, that's kind of what we think that means. 1 Samuel 19. Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David. But Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. Jonathan told David, "My father Saul is trying to kill you. Therefore, be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. If I learn anything, I will tell you." Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul, saying to him, "The king should not sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have been of good service to you. For he took his life in his hand when he attacked the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against an innocent person by killing David without cause?" So Jonathan has taken up the role of defense attorney for David. And he's got a great point. What has David done wrong? All of his deeds have been to your glory.
What David did wrong was do it too well.
Yeah, he taught the choir to sing a new song.
Right. Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. Saul said, "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and related all these things to him. Jonathan then brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. That phrase, "as the Lord lives," that's a long time. Do we really think Saul's going to live up to, making a covenant using the Lord's name? I swear on my kids, I swear on God the Father that I will not put David to death. Yeah, we'll see how that works. Verse 8, again there was war. David went out to fight the Philistines. He launched a heavy attack on them, so they fled before him. Then an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. There it is again, while David was playing music. Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul so that he struck the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. So Saul has lied. He swore on the Lord's name that I will not kill David, and then he tries to kill him. This is the last time that David is in a palace until he becomes king. So Saul sent messengers to David's house to keep watch over him, planning to kill him in the morning. David's wife Michal told him, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through the window. He fled away and escaped. Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed. That should tell you something about the house of Saul. Okay, that they still have idols. She put a net of goat's hair on its head and covered it with clothes. So she dressed up this little figure. Yeah, I know all about that. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. Then Saul sent the messengers to see David for themselves. He said, bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him. When the messengers came in, the idol was in the bed with the covering of goat's hair on its head. Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? Michal answered Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you? Man, lying really runs in this family. So yeah, there's idols here in the house of Saul because they're in the palace. Saul's allowing it. In this point, he tells his messengers after Michal says, he's sick, leave him alone. He's dead sick. Saul gets mad. He says, go get him and bring him here that I can kill him myself. He's so lazy. He can't even get out of his own bed and go do it.
Not too good with the spear either.
Right.
So Michal tells her father that David was thinking about killing her. Is that what they-
That's what she said.
Yeah.
So idol worship still runs in the family. Lying still runs in the family. And of course, it's kind of a neat thing that everybody in Saul's family seems to love David except for Saul. I mean,
He's jealous.
right. It's a pride that he cannot let go of his own self-ego. Yeah, anyway. Okay, so we're not done with 1 Samuel yet, but we're going to switch over and read Psalm 59. So we're going to mark where you were. Of course, it'll be on the screen too.
59.
Psalm 59, it's a prayer for deliverance from enemies.
Deliver me from my enemies.
It, the little byline is to the leader, do not destroy. That's the name of the psalm of David. A miktam, which Saul ordered his house to be watched in order to kill him. So this is something that it's attributed to David is writing based on his experiences with Saul trying to kill him, sending people to go watch over his house. So, deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil. From the bloodthirsty, save me. Even now they lie in wait for my life. They mighty stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord. For no fault of mine they run and make ready. Rouse yourself. Come to my help and see. You, Lord God of hosts, are God of Israel. Awake to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. Then we get that word Selah, which we believe means pause. Kind of pause for a second. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. There they are, bellowing with their mouths, with sharp words on their lips. For who, they think, will hear us? But you laugh at them, O Lord. You hold all the nations in derision. O my strength, I will watch for you. For you, O God, are my fortress. My God, in his steadfast love, will meet me. My God will let me look in triumph on my enemies. Do not kill them, or my people may forget. Make them totter by your power and bring them down, O Lord, our shield. For the sin of their mouths, the words of their lips, let them be trapped in their pride for the cursing and lies that they utter. Consume them in wrath, consume them until they are no more. Then it will be known to the ends of the earth that God rules over Jacob. And then back to the chorus. Each evening they come back howling like dogs and prowling about the city. They roam about for food and growl if they do not get their fill. but I will sing of your might. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love in the morning. For you have been a fortress for me and a refuge in the day of my distress. O my strength, I will sing praises to you. For you, O God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love. Ooh, that's nice. And we can see how it could be a song, because it's got verses and it's got a chorus that keeps, at least, right, so
Yeah.
that it keeps going back to. So, yeah, Saul, a pretty prolific writer that he,
Now, wait, not Saul.
oh, Saul, yeah, David, sorry. I'm sure Saul wrote some songs too. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. So, okay, back to 1 Samuel 19, verse 18. So maybe a second here.
18?
1 Samuel 19,
19.
verse 18.
Oh, verse 18.
Now David fled and escaped. He went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and settled at Naioth. Saul was told, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. When they saw the company of the prophets in a frenzy, with Samuel standing in charge of them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also fell into a prophetic frenzy. There's a revival going on here, guys, and yeah, they're singing and dancing. We've got one of those charismatic moments happening. When Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they also fell into a frenzy. Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also fell into a frenzy. Then he himself went to Ramah. He came to the great well that is in Seku. He said, "Where are Samuel and David?" And someone said, "They are at Naioth in Ramah." He went there toward Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him. As he was going, he fell into a prophetic frenzy until he came to Naioth and Ramah. Remember the last time this happened? When Samuel was about to anoint Saul. Saul went into a prophetic frenzy. So the Spirit of God being on Saul changes Saul's whole demeanor into one of worship and praise. And so we can tell when the Spirit of God is on Saul and when he's not. Because Saul is a completely different person. So anyway. Yeah, so he's dancing and acting all crazy until he gets to Naioth. Naioth, by the way, means dwelling. Seku means bare height or like a mesa. Verse 24, he too stripped off his clothes. So what does that say about the rest of them? Yeah, he got a bunch of naked guys running around dancing. He too fell into a frenzy before Samuel. He lay naked all that day and all that night. Therefore it is said, is Saul also among the prophets? He's acting just like these prophets so much that people standing around can't discern the difference between him and the other prophets. So he basically he has removed his royal garments, and this can be looked at as a sign of humility and in Saul's case, finality. Still got a long way to go with Saul, but this is just the first indicator that his throne is about to be removed. So next time, boy, we went through that real quick. David tries, Jonathan lies, Saul flies off the handle, and Ahimelech fries. Okay, that's the Baptist in me. Got to make everything rhyme.
You're a poet, don't know it, huh?
Okay, so are there any questions, concerns, criticisms, complaints? Go back to our screen.
Saul goes, and David doesn't stay there and challenge Saul. I mean, theoretically, I guess he could have.
That's next week.
Um,
Yeah, tune in next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Soap opera.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm getting at is this all plays out. I think soap operas use this as their as their storyline.
Yeah, people
No,
change
used
characters
to.
on soap operas, you know, they're good guys, and then the next cycle, maybe they're the bad guy.
And then one of them dies,
And
and
they come
then
back to life.
right, so one of them dies, and 30 years later, another person comes to claim it again. Yeah, it's used to watch nighttime dramas, and especially these medical dramas at night, back there, ER and Chicago Hope, and, now, at least I think it's still on. It's like things like Chicago Med and things like that. I laugh because there's two other shows that I used to watch called New Amsterdam
Yeah.
and The Resident. And of course, they're all hospital shows. Now I watch them because that was my life for 27 years, and I like to critique them. I like to see what they're doing wrong. I always say that maybe I should, that maybe I should have been their consultant because they got it all wrong. That's not what it's like. And Karen she used to get frustrated with me because I'd already had the diagnosis in the first 5 minutes. That took an hour for them to figure out.
And you were the spoiler for her.
Very much so, yeah. But she kind of said, "You were right again." But I noticed that over the course of a season, they would have the same storylines. Like not on the same night, but it's like they copied each other, or the writers for these groups would let it leak out that this is going to be it, or so.
Don't you think sometimes they take an actual event and broaden it and mess with it?
Most definitely. In fact, especially when it comes to major things, after COVID, or I say after COVID, COVID shut down a lot of things, including Hollywood for a while. And so they stopped filming. People weren't going to work and all that. Well, when they come back, they've got episodes on all these stations, all these shows
Mashed up.
with the same storyline. It's all about COVID. And so, yes, they do use real life events for that kind of stuff.
I think this Bible passage that we're reading now, pay attention to Michael.
That's what I keep saying.
I know that. But the relationship between her and David changes
It does.
abruptly. And it's just kind of weird. It's kind of like soap opera.
Michael, so Michael lies because David ain't sick. We don't think he threatened to kill her. So it's quick for her to lie. And one of those ethical things that I've gone through in my past where I have to, when it comes to an ethical dilemma, is it ever right to do the wrong thing? And is it ever wrong to do the right thing? In this case, in order to save David's life, Michael feels it's right to do the wrong thing by lying. Lying's not good. It's the wrong thing, okay? But in order to save David's life, she doesn't. And that's an ethical dilemma. So this is where those gray areas of ethics come into play that we subconsciously we fight with all the time. We don't realize it, but we do. When I had a very similar situation, Megan, I may have relayed this to y'all before, but Megan was getting ready to go take a test. And of course, this was a final. And there wasn't going to be a makeup. This was the final. And I'm driving her to school that morning when my phone rings, and it's Karen. Of course, Megan heard the phone tone. She knew it was Karen. My father-in-law had passed over while I'm driving Megan to school. And I've got a choice to make because Megan's saying, "What does mommy want?" I have a choice whether to tell her the truth or whether in my mind, I'm quickly thinking, well, she really needs to take this test. She needs to do well. She don't need to worry about this. So I said, we're just going over to grandma's after school. So I didn't technically lie to her by, outright telling her something false, but I also didn't tell her the truth about it because I omitted some major things. So a very similar thing. I did the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Well, that's okay, because Megan, I'm sure, being female, is perceptive. And she noticed the failure of your countenance, no doubt.
Boy, I'm trapping myself here now. Part part of a pastor's job is to motivate people, and sometimes that can be perceived as manipulation. Is that a word?
You need a spear.
Yeah, yeah, if you see me with a spear, you have no thing to fear, because I can't throw one.
I can't dodge either.
Any other questions or concerns or anything? No? Okay, well, for everybody that's going to inquire, that's everybody in this room. We'll go ahead and close it out. Everybody say bye.
Bye.